I want a Galactic Civilization 2. A review. Do you want to make some numbers go up? Do you wish you were trapped in the year 2006? Are you addicted to dopamine, dark screens, and the feeling like there is hope for biological life beyond the confines of the planet they are exclusively adapted to live on? I'm off ED, and in place of therapy, allow me to review Galactic Civilizations 2 for PC. It's one of those space games. You know the ones that are kind of like Galactic Civilizations 2. There are white dots on a black background, and your job is to rule over them, and possibly kill anyone else who tries to rule over them. It's a 4X game. This terrible description probably tells you everything you need to know if you've played any kind of 4X game. Your dots give you numbers, the numbers give you angry numbers, and the angry numbers acquire you more dots. But in this game, there's quite the emphasis on friendly numbers too, and to have any hope of explaining what I mean by this, let's describe a few features of the game, and perhaps why I think that they're good. It's space, it's the future, it's time to learn how to become a space empire, and where better to start than with a tech tree. Or in this case, many separate but usually long stretches of tech bamboo. A curious thing about the tech tree is that you start with some basics not even unlocked, leaving me wondering how these civilizations even got this stuff into space in the first place. With things like buildings, space stations, and even the concept of research itself requiring research, you actually have a lot of leeway to spec into certain builds, which I guess is the point. For example, for a while you might be the only faction that works out how to trade, or the only one that works out how to reproduce real good, or the only one who works out how to fight. The factions don't have access to the basics early on, so specialist builds and timing attacks are there for the exploiting. You even have to research capitalism early on. Well, you don't actually have to, because as you might note, the strand with capitalism on it ends right at the beginning. What are we to make of this? Remember kids, capitalism is a dead end. In this timeline, Marx didn't write Capital because he was really into designing hyperdrives instead. Who controls the means that produces hyperdrives? Who knows? I'd rather people didn't know, because if they really followed the money, I think they'd discover it was me controlling their very lives. And they're all quite literally just numbers to me. Number go up, number go down. That's pretty much all Marx ever discovered anyway. An actual point to make about this lack of early game techs is how it plays into the classic 4X game meta strategy question. Should I just attack and kill the nearest player to me immediately? In theory, if you gain the number producing ability of another player, you will now beat all other players, unless they did it as well, in which case kill the players that didn't do this and then you win. That's how it usually goes. But since there is a fairly long build-up, possibly hours long, where you don't have the tech to capture anyone's planets, the most you can do is get some early game ships out and just stop other players from advancing too much. It is not enough that I should succeed, others must fail. Well, the point is, it isn't super easy to rush someone because rush protection is built into the way you have to really slowly work out how to attach a gun to a spaceship. As if that wouldn't be the first thing a civilized species would try. All this is nice and good, so even though it's weird and it doesn't make sense, I liked that it was like this. And also, I think you have the option somewhere to start with military techs unlocked. I liked how viable doing some kind of influence build or diplomacy build was, since you can get the advantages of being on those routes right away, gaining new abilities that others won't have. And that's all aside from the usual military stuff that 4X games usually reward heavily. I want to be nice to people, you know, unless there is a number that goes up when I kill them. I am a slave to the number, but in return, the number is a slave to me. I am in love with the number, in a poetic way. Is this not very good first date conversation? I suppose we only just met, strange alien creature. Or have we? When you meet the other factions, you might be surprised to learn they aren't interested in your alien ass and treat you like just another loser in line at a 2006 used game store in that dingy corner of a mall. I'm trying to say, the game doesn't have any notion of first contact. It's more like all the factions knew about each other already, and one day at the same time decided, you know what, let's start a contest to see who can kill each other the most, and then the game begins. And the pacifist factions are like, but what if we simply work together on great achievements? And I say, man, I just want to take your number so that my number gets bigger. And they say, but if we teamed up, it's like our numbers are added, and you wouldn't even have to do anything. And I say, you can't fool me with your talk of addition, because we purged all the mathematicians at the same time as the capitalists, and before any further questions are asked, I depart this intergalactic senate and task our finest minds with discovering whether explosions work in space. Well, actually, the game has many victory options, and you can totally set things up so that you can work for a science, cultural, or religious kind of victory, making use of treaties with other factions to share research and economic gains to mutually advance, such that everyone gets to enjoy numbers going up, and you can even just ally to the rest of the players to win automatically. But it's one of those annoying facts of nature that if one faction starts gearing up to kill the others, then you have to do it as well to stop them. And then it gets really easy to just be the one killing everyone yourself. If you want peace, you must prepare for war. And since you prepared for war, who needs peace? The dream of a true strategic diplomatic action 4X game remains, so until we have the Metal Gear series of spacey number goes up simulators, we have to content ourselves with games like Galactic Civ 2 that at least provide decent options aside from killing each other. Now on to what you really want to hear about: killing each other. Combat is delightfully simple, with your usual 3-element system of weapons and armor types being good against each other in various ways, with the numbers themselves being very low, so very easy to understand as a result. The actual clashes, though, are auto-resolve only, so there's no control over what happens, nor is there any presumption that you even should have control. The game is much more interested in providing you loads of options for getting cool camera angles on the action as it unfolds. From the way this was introduced in the tutorial, I could tell they added all this relatively useless work for themselves, making this battle system for the sole purpose that people wanted to see cool spaceships shooting lasers at each other. The 2006 dream remains alive today, it seems, because while you can skip all the battle scenes, and you probably should because all you need is to get the result and move on with your gameplay, I still stuck around and watched the not especially pretty combat unfold. There's some kind of weird gambling-like minigame going on for ground combat, and here I didn't really know what was going on that much, but it seems to work. One thing I was at first disappointed by is the low scale of the fights, with it saying you have like 5,000 troops to invade a whole planet, but much later in the stats screen it's like battle casualties 22.6 billion. Oh, whoops. I guess those numbers from earlier were metaphors or something. Is this what it's like when generals have to tell Putin what's happening in the war? Well, we accidentally exterminated whole planets, and it was all quite neat and tidy, and I'm not hearing any complaints about it, so there you go. Now my number can replace your number up there in the population number box, and therefore all acts are justified. Galactic civilization indeed. So that's all well and good, but you might know there are loads of games that are sort of like Galactic Civilization 2 out there. There are even several games with Galactic Civilization quite literally in the title. Thus, I ask, what is it that stands out about Galactic Civ 2 in particular, from the pen of a man who hasn't played the other Gal Civ games because I heard a rumour they were worse somehow. So it's just 2 for now, and fittingly I have 2 things I think the game does well. Now, with some further ado, I will tell you what they are. Number 1, this game comes across as being made by nerds for nerds. I think there is a certain combination of intellect and spite that allows one to desire to make a game that other spiteful intellectuals will enjoy. That means making a game where you can be ruthlessly efficient, I think. Literally, I put this point in my notes and I've forgotten what I was talking about, but the vague idea is that the game has a sense of being tailored for use by those who want to do things the fast way. like having the ability to automatically bribe someone precisely the correct amount to make them accept a deal, or to change all of the production on all planets at the same time to suddenly spam out something to do a plan, and have them all automatically fly to the same place ready for you to do it. Macro over micro, power fantasy in strategy games, something. I had a point here somewhere. Please just imagine I made it well. Thing number 2. A standout feature for me is being able to build anywhere, including in other players' territory, and giving you loads of options for how to set up your network of space stations to deal with whatever RNG cards the game dealt you in terms of resources, positioning and such. I enjoyed the freedom to use space stations to augment your plans, like boosting the economy, making military strongpoints, stealing other players' stuff by making them defect. It's something the game doesn't need to work, and it adds that extra layer on top of the usual generic place generates numbers 4x map game thing. Well said. The game also has nice tutorials that teach you meta info, like what strategies are likely to work for new players, how to set up games with good settings for learning, and what things the devs expect you to do early on to learn the game. Then once the admittedly too low resolution lectures are over, you're free to try it all for yourself and essentially learn by experience, only with less likelihood of going for terrible or difficult builds, which I found nice. I actually ignored the advice and things were still fine, but you know, not everyone is a radical genius like the famous Offie. Now let's say a few things that are bad. Obviously, it's old, and you will be held back by general clunkiness and an old-fashioned focus on function over form. That means something like selecting a unit once it's built is a couple more clicks than you might like, or some info you need on one screen is stored on another screen and you have to go back and forth with it. These sorts of pre-UX revolution things that I guess are to be expected. The main thing you'll notice is that the UI has loads of very small parts, and that's just what it's like when you play something that was probably tested mainly on 480p 4.3 monitors that were heavier than the desk they sat on. So it's still just about usable in 1080p, but perhaps mods could make it a bit easier. The vibe of the UI is a little over-designed, taking an old idea that 3D stuff and things that are harder to make and render are automatically cooler and more futuristic. I wonder if one day this style will somehow make a comeback. They did this to a much harsher degree in their next game, Sins of a Solar Empire, and I got mad there about how it legit held the UI back with its crazy layouts and cluttered graphics. That's the sort of thing I get mad about because I used to be so bored working for a software company that I read the nerdiest forums in the universe for hours on end, and I got radicalized into seeking perfect UI designs. Our species didn't evolve to handle this. We have to go back. A final thing I'll mention is the ship designer, which lets you customize or custom build your ships your empire will use. The idea is you might be able to make a ship that does well against certain enemy ships or has some specific function, like being able to set up a trade route in hostile space without getting killed. I don't know, because the point I wanted to make was that I didn't find much use from it, since the game comes with loads of pre-made designs that sometimes auto-update to use your latest tech, and I just use those without issue. I like the idea, but in practice I prefer the fast way of just skipping these, even though in the tutorials it was clear the devs were proud of this very extensive system and were excited for players to use it. Sorry, I'm dead inside, as probably mentioned already, so numbers is all I need. In fact, my best achievement was making a ship with no hull, so it was just an engine with a gun attached. Pure number. One day I will reduce myself to just a brain with fingers coming out so I can type things on the internet, and truly I will be perfect. In conclusion, I'll give Galactic Civilizations 2 the highest award that the Offie Game Grounds channel can give. I wanted to play it, meaning that once I stopped playing I probably could have gone back for more if I wasn't already on a quest to play a load of other things. That is actually pretty rare, so well done GC2. Now to end this video, we'll dive into what I like to call Offie's grand theory of difficulty. This is that a game's review can be entirely skipped, and you can judge the quality of a game based only on the way it handles difficulty levels. You get points for two categories, having options and saying what they do. So let's plug it in. The game has tons of options with absolutely customizable campaigns with difficulty on a per player basis, loads of levels to choose, and you can change the maps and stuff to really make any game as easy or as hard as you like. So it's 5 stars for category 1. However, in the game itself it doesn't tell you what the difficulty levels do, not even a little bit. Possibly it was in a manual or something, but the GTD requires the info to be present at the time you pick the difficulty option in question to count. So basically, it's a flat 0 stars for telling you what they do. I will combine this to give the game 3 stars for difficulty implementation. Does that mean we give the game 3 stars for overall quality? Obviously, this is only a single data point, and the real formula to link difficulty quality to game quality is yet to be determined by the scientists at OffiDHQ. I'd rather say it's a 4-star game, being essentially 5 stars but -1 for jank and oldness. I'm sure for some that's worth -2 instead, but we can't edit the data to fit the theory. That would be unscientific, so like true scientists, we invent data from our imagination, but we don't cherry pick it. That's good enough. There will be steps in the future to flesh the theory out, so check back one day for progress on this grand theory of difficulty. And that's all. A review for another game might appear sometime if I can be bothered, otherwise I'll have more long-form commentaries on the way. GG.